Shalom, first and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who are teaching this truth in sincerity. And a shout out to Yakim that's out there on four corners of the earth proclaiming this truth. Brakat the Yahweh, Brakat the Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, Brakatum. So, a lot going on now as, the famine of the word is coming, but also a real famine is actually happening as the Most High is punishing the wicked and the two-thirds that do not want to listen, which you can equate to the wicked. Because, here it is, we're going out daily and weekly, anytime, anywhere, going out and proclaiming this truth, and yet they still don't want to listen, they don't want to repent, they don't want to come back to the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High, but they just rather stay here. Well, there's no future here, because this famine is coming. So here's the first part of this, and we know that it couldn't happen to a bunch of goddamn terrorists, because the real terrorists are the Red Hebrew Edomites, not the Revolutionary Republican Guard, or wait a minute, that's an old name of Iraq, but either way, though, the Iranian Republican Guards, man, fucking Esau is the goddamn fucking terrorist, and all these are taking a proverb against him. But while that's going on, you also have the economic crisis, and then you got a huge famine that will be taking effect very shortly here.
We are now facing the worst economic disaster for U.S. farmers in modern American history. You would be hard-pressed to know this or to find any information on this if you tuned into your establishment-controlled, mainstream evening news, where they're saying very little about what's coming around the pike. I'm warning all of you. You gotta pay attention to the signs, what's happening here. Farmers here in the U.S. are finding out the hard way. They're finding out now that not only after losing millions in crops, that a lot of damage has been done, but now they're finding out that insurance is not covering any of this. Absolutely devastating on top of already devastating news. Now, we already knew that around the corner, toward the end of this year, come harvest season, that we were going to start to feel the brunt of this. Like I said, they're not warning people. They're not telling people prepare for this. Anything of the sorts. We had this odd flooding come down through these areas that wasn't from the snow melt off. It wasn't from the spring rains. So we've still got all of that yet to face here in the coming weeks. That may happen gradual. And then if that all does happen gradual with no massive flooding, you have to ask yourself, what is causing these weird floods to come about? Well, what's also interesting here is you need to realize this. Someone was watching this whole thing unfold, and I don't like the looks of it, because I'm starting to feel like we've been attacked in this sector by someone that has the ability to make it rain, and to make it rain out of nowhere so quickly that farmers, that even if they wanted to move their goods on the ground, they couldn't.
So, you know who's doing that? The fucking Rothschilds, the bankers, are the ones that are doing it because they're looking to cash out. And what do you think that's going to do?
And this is the kicker. While no one was paying attention, farmers started storing crops on their farms more than ever before, starting in the early part of this year. They did so because the prices of wheat, corn, and soybean depressed greatly because of the whole trade war situation. So they started storing them in bins all over these areas. And wouldn't you know, out of nowhere come these freak floods that come and wash them all away.
So there goes your prepping right there. You see, Esau does know about the preppers. They even have a show on Netflix all about it. So, you trust in this system, man. But like I said, the famine of the word is coming as well. As you know, Julian Assange was recently arrested, and he was a truther. Just like we're truthers, we go out on the streets and we're telling the truth about Esau Edom. They definitely been trying to silence us for a while. That's why we were featured in the news earlier this year, over a instigated thing, which we know that you had crisis actors and all that play this thing out so that way they could demonize us. So anyhow, this is from We Are Change about how they're all going after Julian Assange, who was arrested in London this week.
Powerful, corrupt politicians who commit crimes only have one enemy. That enemy is, of course, the people who expose those crimes. And that's very true with, of course, the latest case that just happened with Julian Assange of WikiLeaks. Now, there's a lot to get into. There's a hacker in Ecuador that was arrested. There's allegations of walls being smeared with poop, extortion of sex tapes, IMF loans. There's so many different things to get into that we're going to get into. But first of all, let's get into some of the reactions. Obviously, everyone's going to be talking about cackling Hillary, evil Clinton. We're going to get into her in just a little bit. But before we get into the negative, let's get into the people who actually stood up for free speech, stood up for journalism, stood up for, telling the truth. And the few individuals who did, they do deserve some shout-outs. The people I saw was Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Tulsi Gabbard. Jason, who did you see?
Oh, fuck Sean Hannity and all them. Anyhow, nonetheless, Julian Assange, is a whistleblower. But what's interesting is he mentions others. Now, who he didn't mention is Press TV. Hey, you remember who got arrested earlier this year for telling the truth? He didn't make mention of it, of course, because she's not an Edomite. Press TV's own anchor. Now, you already know that the terrorists, the real terrorists, which are the Red Hebrew Edomites, have recently demonized the Persian Republican Guard, pretty much, who actually was invited by Syria to fight the terrorists that Esau put in there, the Amalekites put in there, ISIS. And so we know who the real terrorists are. So Esau's trying to flip the coin and say that Iran is the terrorist. And they arrested this journalist earlier this year because of the fact that, Press TV has also been holding Esau accountable for everything. Many are taking a proverb against Esau, but she was another truther who was held captive by the terrorists themselves, because that's who these Red Hebrew Edomites are.
Syria has condemned the U.S. for designating Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards Corps as a terrorist organization. The Syrian Foreign Ministry has described the move as irresponsible and a blatant attack on Iran's sovereignty. The ministry says the measure shows that the IRGC has played an important role in defending Iran and highlights its resistance against the U.S. and Israel. It also says the designation is, quote, a badge of honor for the IRGC. To discuss that more, we're joined by Mr. Alexander Azadgan, geopolitical analyst and professor of international political economy, and also Said Mohsen Abbas, journalist and commentator. Thank you very much to both of you gentlemen for joining us on this edition of the News Review. Let's begin with Mr.
Well, yeah, I take that back. That's not the reporter, but you know who I'm talking about.
The Trump administration has done it all, and they can do nothing to shock us again. They manage to come up with an outrageous move like the one they just did. What do you think the Trump administration is seeking by designating the military of a sovereign country as a terrorist organization?
Thank you for your invitation, Gisu. It's always wonderful to be with Press TV and your global audience. I think to go right into answering your question, I think whenever you, from Washington's eyes as well as Tel Aviv and Riyadh, whenever you defeat their terrorists, whenever you play a constructive role and stabilizing role in the region, you are labeled to be a terrorist organization. This is apparent to everybody. Unfortunately, we have to do a better job with the audience here in the United States who doesn't know anything, no difference between these terrorist groups that we support. But this wasn't exactly a surprise to us. As a matter of fact, many of us were forecasting it, and it was just a matter of time, of course, because this designation of IRGC as a foreign terrorist organization, FTO, was imminent.
What are they seeking, Mr. Azadgan? What are they seeking by doing so?
Let's go right to the point. What they're trying to do, going after IRGC is of course intended to have major economic consequences because IRGC and its consortium of affiliated companies play a significant role in the Iranian economy. So all these talk about IRGC supporting terrorists, in my opinion, is a red herring. They're going after an organization that has achieved tremendous success in stabilizing Iraq and Syria. That's one factor of it. And the other factor is economic. And the third factor, in my opinion, is pure psychological warfare and the creation of paranoia and fear within Iran.
And that's just it. Paranoia, fear tactics, and everything else, because you grew up in the 80s like I did, man. Iran was always demonized, even though they were using Iraq to bring down the government of Iran. No, man, the real terrorists are the Edomites, and the Edomites are now being found out. So many are blowing the whistle on the fact that the U.S. supports ISIS, you know, and that they created the terror groups. You know, and it doesn't matter what you call them, whether you call them ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra Front, or Daesh terrorists, or Takfiri terrorists, or, you know, Al-Rashan groups. They all have one thing in common. The U.S., the whore, Babylon the Great, and its affiliates had created them, which is mostly Amalek. At least their flock drawing them out. And so here's the people's reaction. They're taking a proverb against Amalek, against the Israeli state, against the real terrorists that are instigating the whole thing. You know, pretty much, they want a war with Persia. They're going to get one. All of them will be joined unto them to go after Amalek, ultimately, and to destroy the whore, Babylon the Great. Because once you destroy the whore, Babylon the Great, guess what? You can go after Amalek. And that's what's about to happen. The Most High is going to bring this. He is bringing this. This being the year Karagma. Yeah, man, like that fucking shit. Burn it. Fuck America. I got rid of my flags long ago because me being in this truth, man. No, our job is to eradicate Amalek. Well, you gotta eradicate everything that Amalek set up, which is the whore Babylon the Great. So, part of eradicating is to be totally divorced from Esau, Edom, especially the whore Babylon the Great. So Persia is warning that the U.S. regime will be responsible for dangerous consequences, especially by now listing the IRGC, in short, as a terrorist group, which we know who the real terrorists are. And again, you know, like I had stated before, eradicating Amalek means divorcing all that you've been taught, especially his sewer stream media, you know, because they control Wall Street Journal, they control CNN, you know, so you gotta be totally divorced from that. Eradicating it means to spew out, man. Fuck what their news says, because they are lying to you, and all their lies are being exposed, and that's why they went after Julian Assange, so you know that the family word will come. But in the meantime, though, if we're no longer out there, man, we ain't gonna believe one fucking word that these goddamn fucking gutter rats have to say. They're fucking liars. Hey, they're lying to the world, say that they're the Jews.
From Ontario, I'm joined by Jason Unruh, who's a political commentator. Let's ask Jason about his opinion on this special day in Iran.
Well, I think this is very significant. This is a celebration of certain milestones that are being made in the development of nuclear technology. Well, the right to peaceful nuclear technology is something that the entire world should have. I mean, it's certainly very obvious that the world is going to be suffering from peak oil very soon. There's going to be, oil is going to run out one day, and everybody needs this technology. I don't know what it is that certain countries think who others shouldn't have this kind of nuclear technology are supposed to do when this runs up. But this is a day of celebration that Iran has continued to develop all kinds of nuclear energy all along general nuclear technology despite protestations by many of the imperialist countries, including the Israeli regime. The Iranian people have every right to stand up and to develop their own peaceful nuclear program to serve their own needs. Iran is a growing country, just as every country is, and self-sufficiency in this area and in terms of the generation of electricity is certainly a very important thing when dealing with many of the aggressions that are being carried out by those same imperialist states. So I think that it's definitely a cause to celebrate. It is a cause that is worthwhile to plow through if one does love their own country and want it to remain independent from the influences of the imperialist powers.
And that's just it, though, is, of course, it's an economic war. It's many wars on all sides. There's even more, that he goes into about Venezuela.
Right now, Venezuela is accusing the United States, and rightly so, of trying to destabilize Venezuela via sabotage. This also includes funding anti-government opposition groups, and President Nicolas Maduro has called it the worst and most criminal act in 20 years. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has accused opponents of using his country as a testing ground for a new war strategy and new kinds of weapons. Venezuela is demonstrating to the world that it is a testing ground for new cybernetic electromagnetic war weapons and a new war strategy, which is not a direct invasion or bombing by missiles, but the bombing of vital public services. Essentially, he's accusing the United States of having carried out an EMP attack, which was used to destabilize the electrical grid inside the country. Now, as you recall, in March, Venezuela suffered the worst power outage in its history, where as many as 21 out of 23 states were left without power. And due to this and other violent threats, Nicolas Maduro has decided to respond by taking the Venezuelan militias, the people's militia, where it's like regular, everyday people that are given military training to defend the country.
Kind of like what's happening in Syria.
2.1 million to 3 million. So this shows that there is an increasing militarization on the part of the Venezuelan government with good reason, because it is essentially being invaded by the United States. Not a direct military invasion, but a destabilization effort. There are terrorist groups being funded inside the country by the United States, etc. So they are facing a very real threat. Now, this all comes as Juan Guaido was stripped of his position of the National Assembly Speaker, I believe it was, where he ended up declaring himself president because of elections which he cannot show any evidence of misconduct at all. And then went to the United States, buddied up with the imperialist powers, advocated incredibly damaging sanctions against the country, which included blocking food and medicine. Well, he's been stripped of those powers, and they are now launching a criminal case against him, hopefully one that will include treason and collusion with foreign powers to destabilize the country. I mean, it was certainly a big deal when Trump was accused of it, right? So imagine how upset people like the Democrats will be if someone in Venezuela actually does what they lament so much. Now, on top of all this, Russian troops have entered into the country. And they're going to be stationed there for a while. And they have various duties. It's not like a full military force. Like a group of advisors and people, I believe, to train how to use helicopters. Or a particular kind of Russian helicopter. On top of that, Chinese soldiers have now arrived in Venezuela as part of a cooperation program between Beijing and Caracas. Now, according to reports, more than 100...
So you can see, though, this is kind of like a risk game, and most of all, Magog is going to be thou guard unto them as well, you know, and, you know, even though Venezuela's not mentioned in the chapter of Ezekiel, this is still a part of it, you know, that Magog is going to be a guard unto many nations. So pretty much the least of their flock is drawing them out, as the whore Babylon the Great and Amalek, Israeli state, have their coordinated campaign against Persia. And also Libya happens to be fighting back to regain their capital as well from the U.S. invasion of Libya.
The situation in Syria is remaining relatively stable amid the continued limited ISIS attacks on the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces (SDF) on the eastern bank of the Euphrates and ceasefire violations in the Idlib demilitarized zone. Over the past few days, pro-militant sources have repeatedly claimed that the Syrian Arab Army (SAA) and even the Russian aerospace forces have delivered strikes on so-called opposition targets in northern Hama and southern Idlib. While these reports are mostly propaganda exaggerations, the situation is in fact complicated, with both sides attacking each other on a more or less constant basis. At the same time, the SAA and Russian forces achieved an important success and finally started evacuation of civilians from the Al Rukban refugee camp via opened humanitarian corridors. Pro-government sources claim that when all civilians are evacuated, the US will use the formal pretext to keep forces on the Baghdad-Damascus highway in the area of Al-Tanf. However, even if this development happens, this does not mean that the US will voluntarily withdraw from this key area anytime soon. The SDF repelled a series of ISIS attacks on the eastern bank of the Euphrates. The most notable incident happened near El Hisan, when the group eliminated an ISIS suicide bomber. Meanwhile, media activists are speculating that Tehran has delivered a new batch of weapons and equipment for pro-Iranian groups to the T4 airbase. This development came amid the worsening relations between Iran and the administration of US President Donald Trump. Iran and Iraq have agreed to cooperate in the area of air defense to fend off the challenges facing their airspaces. Chairman of the Chiefs of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, Major General Mohammad Bakeri, told reporters on April 7th after a meeting with his Iraqi counterpart, Lieutenant General Othman al-Ghanimi. Major General Bakeri said that this coordination is aimed at facing any aerial threats that may come from Iran's western border, obviously referring to possible US or Israeli actions from this direction. On April 8th, the Trump administration announced that it is designating Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization, accusing the force of financing and promoting terrorism in the region. Earlier, advisor to the Secretary of State, Brian Hook, claimed that Iran is responsible for the deaths of at least 608 US service members in Iraq in the period of 2003 to 2011. In response, the Iranian Supreme National Security Council designated the United States Central Command as a terrorist organization. These developments show that Washington has taken course on a new round of the escalation with Iran. In the coming months, the US will likely undertake more measures, both diplomatic, economic, and maybe even military, to increase pressure on the Iranian government and to limit its influence across the Middle East. An expanded US-Israeli campaign against supposed Iranian targets in Syria is named as one of the options that are currently considered by the US.
South Front is a crowd.
So, you already know that this thing's going to escalate because that's what Ezekiel talked about. Now, another country which was invaded by the US, now they're fighting to get their capital back. And that is, of course, Libya, which is named in Ezekiel chapter 38. This is Sputnik News, of course. So you can see them moving in, try to take the capital back from the US-backed forces, which have destabilized and pretty much destroyed Libya. You know, it's what killed Muammar Gaddafi, all these fucking groups. Which, after they were done with Gaddafi, they then sent them into Syria. Just like you're sending terror groups into Venezuela. Last but not least, it's now out there that geoengineering is no longer a conspiracy theory, but rather it's a fact.
You notice what happens when you leave your car parked outside on a sunny day with the windows all the way up, right? Even if it's not that hot outside, the temperature inside your car goes way up compared to the surrounding climate outside of your car. That's essentially the greenhouse effect. You know about it, right? You learned about it in 5th grade. The heat easily gets in, but it can't get out, which is essentially what's happening to our planet right now. So what do people do? Well, they get thicker windows or they add a dark film to their car, right? Same goes for our bodies. We try and prevent sunburn by wearing sunblock so the sun can't really get in and do damage. Well, think about this. What if we could come up with something like that for our Earth's ozone layer? With more on that concept, News with Rick Sanchez correspondent Michelle Greenstein is here to tell us about this. Okay, so it's a new concept. Sounds like the way I described it. What is it?
So this proposal is to use solar geoengineering to reduce temperatures. In essence, it's a way to mitigate some of the risks that climate scientists are saying will come from CO2 emissions. So in essence, it's actually an alternative to lowering carbon emissions. And some see it as a magic bullet in this way, where we can curb the effects of CO2 emissions while continuing to pump millions of tons of CO2 into the air.
But the way I described it was, we need to come up with something that blocks all this from getting in.
And that's a curse to Edomites, man, is because if you're a Jake and you don't have the curse of leprosy, man, then this, man, we don't even have those problems. But that's what Esau's doing, and that's what the chemtrails are about. Not to mention it's poisoning us whenever you fuck with shit like that. But that's what Esau does. That's all he knows.
Is this, how are they going to block it?
Exactly, yes, it is. So this type of geoengineering uses sulfur dioxide. We're going to inject that into the stratosphere. Sulfur dioxide is the stuff that comes out of volcanoes when they erupt. So when a volcano erupts, there's actually a lot of dust and gases that blot out the sun. So these Harvard researchers, these scientists are saying that we can mimic what happens after a volcano eruption to reduce temperatures. And the way they're going to do that is airplanes. They say a fleet of specially designed aircrafts can literally spray sulfur particles into the lower stratosphere, and they're saying, hey, dozens of nations already have the money to do so.
Wait a minute. What you just described is a way of...
And those that aren't on board with that, are getting attacked. That's another thing, is that Syria does not believe in any of this shit. And that's why Syria is quite attacked all the time and demonized, because they're not on board with this. So, yeah, Esau's, again, trying to be the Most High, and controlling all the elements, And that's what geoengineering is, and that's why our fucking air is poisoned, our water is fucking tampered with, our food is definitely being tampered with. I mean, this devil's going all out to pretty much destroy everything.
Slowing down, if not preventing, global warming?
Yeah, I mean, let's not
global warming is bullshit.
Words. What we're proposing here is launching aerosols into the air. So historically, there's been a problem with this, and critics of this type of geoengineering say, look, no one really knows how to control it with accuracy. This could easily disrupt climates around the world, inevitably leading to winners and losers, with some regions suffering greater harm. But now these researchers are saying it can work without some of those anticipated side effects like extreme rain and hurricanes. They're saying that this work challenges that assumption.
Won't they make it darker? Won't it be like night all the time?
Yeah, and that's the question.
So, did you catch those words? Hurricanes and other things? And you wonder why the storms are in the mist, though. It's because Esau's doing shit like this, man. And listen to them try to justify. No, man. This is exactly why the Most High is going to destroy Esau once and for all. And mostly, this could turn the Egyptian against Egyptian. We see that happening. So, while that's going on, they're here, at least their flock is drawn out into this war that they cannot win. And pretty much this is the beast, which is the whore, and NATO, with their increasingly amount of activity, because they're about to make war with Magog.
NATO is preparing a package of measures to counter Russia in the Black Sea region. This package includes the deployment of NATO warships to the Black Sea to guarantee passage of Ukrainian ships via the Kerch Strait, US Ambassador to NATO Kay Bailey Hutchison stressed during a press briefing on April the 2nd. Hutchison said that the prepared package beefs up the surveillance, both air surveillance as well as more of the NATO country ships going into the Black Sea, to assure that there is safe passage from Ukrainian vessels through the Kerch Straits, the Sea of Azov. Earlier, the US State Department announced that the Black Sea package is a response to the challenges the US and NATO face in the region, not merely because of the Kerch Strait incident, but because Russia is threatening the alliance all along the eastern flank, not just in the north. The public announcement of a possible NATO operation in the Kerch Strait is itself a move undermining the shaky stability created after the incident of November 25, 2018, when Russian coastal guards detained 3 ships of the Ukrainian Navy which were attempting to enter the Kerch Strait in a way which violated the established norms and rules. Then, Moscow's actions gave rise to large-scale hysteria in mainstream and Ukrainian media outlets. However, the situation developed no further. Ukraine's partners limited their response to formal declarations. It was clear that the Kiev government was the side that had provoked the conflict. Before and after the Kerch Strait incident, Ukrainian ships were passing the strait after going through the formal procedures established in this area. If NATO naval forces, together with or in some form assisting Ukrainian forces, were to make an attempt to break through the Kerch Strait by force, violating the established rules of passage, this would be seen by Moscow as an aggressive military action, which would provoke an equivalent response. In other words, a military clash could be expected. In such an event, the situation might escalate further. The media and political importance of such developments could be compared with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which became the formal pretext for the start of the First World War, or the annexation of the Sudetenland by Nazi Germany before the start of the Second World War. At the beginning of 2019, it seemed that despite the unfriendly rhetoric between the United States and Russia, there were actually no valid reasons for organizing the next armed incident, at a minimum, or, in the worst case, for starting a war. However, there are a number of factors which may nudge Washington towards pushing for an escalation in the Black Sea region. 1. On March the 25th, President Donald Trump officially signed a declaration recognizing the Golan Heights as part of Israel.
And that, more than anything else, is what's going to really kick this thing off, this being the year Karagma.
Players. The Trump administration has now destroyed one of the last fragments of the post-World War II international security system. This action, as well as previous blatant violations of international law, will have negative consequences for the entire system of international security and international law. Following this, global players can be less and less concerned about even the formal justification of their actions from the point of view of international law, and can increasingly rely on military power, sanctions and informational pressure, coup and other hybrid methods to achieve their goals. As we see, Washington is the forerunner in the employment of such approaches. Now, the White House is interested in diverting international attention from the current situation and from the expected consequences of Golan-style decisions. 2. The failure of the Venezuelan blitzkrieg forced Washington to reconsider the approaches employed to force regime change. The inability of the US to fully delegitimize and overthrow the Maduro government is based on several factors. Insufficient support from the local population for the US creature, the decision of the military to support the legitimate government, the resolution of Maduro himself and his inner circle, who, unlike the former Ukrainian president Viktor Yanukovych in 2014, were not prepared to sit by indifferently while power was seized by the henchmen of external forces. The strong stand of China and Russia in support of Venezuela and the surprising inability of the Trump administration to set up a strong anti-Venezuelan coalition, even at the regional level. So far, most of the US regime change partners have limited their participation to formal declarations.
And that's a good thing, seeing the U.S. get weaker and weaker in their decision-making, and most people ain't on board with this devil here, you know. You can definitely see, though, that the whore is losing in every way possible, and that's a good thing. We pray that he fails even more so.
Or, like Colombia, to a lack of opposition to the actions of US agents. So the US operation has entered a new phase. The economic and diplomatic pressure on the Maduro government has increased, and the country has experienced a series of large-scale accidents targeting critical objects of the energy infrastructure. The Maduro government openly blames hostile actions by the US for the recent series of blackouts. There are signals that the US is preparing for a military operation in the region, on its own or within the framework of a formally created coalition, to put an end to the resistance of Caracas. To ensure the success of this operation, Washington has to carry out actions on the periphery to distract attention from the Venezuelan issue. 3. The situation in Ukraine ahead of the second round of the presidential election is not stable. Experts and analysts have serious doubts that Poroshenko actually gained fairly the 16% which allowed him to proceed to the second round. It is suggested that from 3 to 8% may have been obtained fraudulently. Even if the incumbent president really did get 16% of the vote, the entire structure of voting demonstrated that the Ukrainians are frustrated by the destructive policy of the ruling regime and the status as a Western colony obtained by Ukraine in 2014. The arbitrary development of this situation could create conditions in which the US and the associated European bureaucracy would lose their influence in Ukraine, and as a result, the money spent on bringing Kiev to vassalage. In the event of the escalation of the political struggle, a possible outcome could even be that Ukraine would split further into two political antagonists along the west-east line. If the Washington establishment wants to keep the situation under control, it must create the conditions under which Poroshenko could achieve victory. Or, if Vladimir Zelensky win, he must be limited in his ability to maneuver and de-escalate relations, or even start a dialogue with Russia. He must also be prevented from starting a more or less independent dialogue, i.e. not that of a vassal, with the European Union. A military provocation in the Kerch Strait with the support of NATO warships would be suitable for achieving all of the goals just described. Moreover, the logic of NATO's actions includes damage to the infrastructure of the Crimean Bridge, or at least its significant damage during the incident. This would have a resounding informational effect, and would create significant problems for the economy of Crimea. Another interesting point is the declaration that Russia is threatening the alliance all along the eastern flank, not just in the north. The entire format of such rhetoric raises eyebrows. If, in the case of the northern front, such statements can be justified with the complex configuration around Kaliningrad and the specific historical experience of the Baltic countries and Poland with Russia, the statement about the Russian threat in the south is a rude propaganda cliché. Hutchison stressed that Russia is threatening Romania, Bulgaria, and Ukraine, as well as Georgia. But there are some issues. Georgia is separated from Russia by mountains, is not a NATO country, and does not experience territorial claims from Russia. Moreover, Russia still categorically refuses to consider the inclusion of South Ossetia and Abkhazia into its own territory. Almost 30 years have passed since the actual independence of these republics, and almost 11 years since the last aggressive war unleashed by Georgia with the support of NATO. Ukraine is also not a NATO country, and recent years have shown that Moscow has no desire to conduct full-scale military operations on its territory. Bulgaria
and that's another thing, is Vladimir Putin said, in 2 weeks I could have Kiev if I wanted it, you know. And so we know who the aggressor was here. We know that it's Babylon.
Romania do not have a land border with Russia, and both states have working bilateral relations with Moscow. Even more strikingly, US statements do not even mention the second most significant military state of NATO, the country whose military potential exceeds the combined military potential of Bulgaria, Romania, Georgia, and Greece, Turkey, which, by the way, is located on the southern flank of the military bloc. This statement by a representative of the Washington establishment is another vulgar example of Psaki-style rhetoric that has little to do with democratic values, freedom, or a desire for justice. They themselves do not believe in it. They know only that a few others do believe in it. Thus they simply mock the masses, who they consider to be sheep. Such statements demonstrate that Washington is seriously considering conducting aggressive actions in the near future in several directions at once. Southfront is a crowdfund.
So yeah, you know, like everything else though, this is going to backfire on Esau, and you can see that it is ever since, you know, he declared the Golan Heights as Israeli territory, you know, and so, man, death to America. I'm just going to pull out some scriptures here. 2nd Esdras chapter 1 verse 4, and it reads, "And the word of the Most High came unto me, saying, Go thy way, and show my people their sinful deeds, and their children their wickedness, which they have done against me, that they may tell their children's children, because of the sins of their fathers are increased in them, for they have forgotten me, and have offered unto strange gods." Well, who's this strange god? Well, that would be Amalekite philosophy, because philosophies is another term for gods. So they offer unto strange gods, you know, calling upon other names, Caesar Borgia, aka Corpus Christos, who they like to call Jesus Christ, or Yahweh, or any of them false names, you know. And, you know, that's just the beginning of it. I mean, there's, you know, our people are into Buddhism, Islam, you know, it just, the list goes on. And yet, you know, if they do not repent of these things, they're going to be destroyed. Look at what's happening now, you know, with everything. You know, and we're in modern day Egypt, you know, we're in New Egypt. Am not I even he that brought them out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage? But they have provoked me unto wrath, and despised my counsels. People don't want to hear this counsel that we're declaring on the streets, you know. 2/3 of my people would rather stay wicked. Put thou off them the hair of thy head, and cast all evil upon them. For they have not been obedient unto my law, but it is a rebellious people. You know, that's where you get the common saying from. You know, oh, you know, Israel, they're a rebellious people. We're a rebellious people. We get it right out of here, right out of the Bible. And the Apocrypha has everything to do with the Bible. That's why Esau took it out. How long shall I forbear them, into whom I have done so much good? Many kings have I destroyed for their sakes. Pharaoh with his servants and all his power have I smitten down. All the nations have I destroyed before him. And in the east I have scattered the people of 2 provinces, even of Tyrus and Sidon, and have slain all their enemies. So, again, you know, just as the Most High had done for us before, man, he's going to destroy the wicked this time, you know, just as he had always done before. But 2/3 of our people are going to be caught up in this judgment, brought unto wrath, you know. And we know what this judgment is. It's the final fire judgment. Speak thou therefore unto them, saying, Thus saith the Most High, I led you through the sea in the beginning, gave you a large and safe passage. I gave you Moses for a leader, and Aaron for a priest. I gave you a light and a pillar of fire, and great wonders have I done among you. Yet you have forgotten me, saith the Most High. Thus saith the Almighty Power. The quails were as a token to you. I gave you tents for your safeguard. Nevertheless, you murmured there, and triumphed not in thy name for the destruction of your enemies. But ever to this day do ye yet murmur. You know, you got 2/3 of our people wanting to save Esau, you know, or just wanting to be, you know, wanting to have mercy upon this devil. That's not how it works. Where are the benefits that I have done for you? When you were hungry and thirsty in the wilderness, did you not cry unto me? And that's what's going to happen just right before he comes the second time, man. You know? Yeah, man. You know what's about to happen, you know. He's going to smite this place as he's doing already. But we're going to start feeling the impact, you know, by the time summer comes around from all of this, which, you know, this geoengineering shit and everything else has been purposed. Saying, what hast thou brought us into the wilderness to kill us? It has been better for us to have served the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. You know? And that's just it, man. You know, nah, man, you know, for everything that's happened, you know, people just don't even think that this will happen again. But, you know, as they say, history repeats itself. Where do you think that comes from? Comes right from the scriptures, man. Then had I pity upon your mornings and gave you manna to eat, so you did eat angel's bread. When you were thirsty, did I not cleave the rock, and waters flowed out to your fill? For the heat I covered you with the leaves of trees. I divided among you a fruitful land. I cast out the Canaanites, the Perizzites, and the Philistines before you. What shall I yet do more for you, saith the Most High? Well, we already know what he's about to do for us, for those that are in this truth. We're about to eradicate Amalek from the land. We're going to get those bastards out of Ashdod. And this final battle in the valley of Yehoshaphat is happening now as the Most High is mustering it. And, nah, man. Esau thinks that he's playing the game? No, man. The game is the Most High. The Most High played Esau. It's his chessboard. And just fulfilling his role. So I hope this has been edifying. For all that, I want to say Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, Bracha Tam, death to America, and death to you 2/3 that don't want to repent. This judgment that was meant for the wicked, well, consider yourself among the wicked, because that's who you're joined to.